Hello everyone and welcome back. If you're new to the channel, I'm Andy Fellows. I make videos on destructive cults, damaging norms and just generally bad ideas. Before we get started in today's video, I just want to issue a correction on something that happened in the previous video. I need to be clear about something. One of the quotes in the previous video I was wrong about. I believed at the time of recording the video that Teal Swan had taken a quote from a Facebook page called Great Big Minds or something like that. Actually, it turns out that that is not the case. Although it did appear on the Facebook page Great Big Minds before that version of Teal's quote appeared on her Instagram. There's an earlier version of the quote by Teal, which is slightly different, which, until I did a little bit more research, did seem to be hers. However, as far as I can tell, it is still not her. Actually, there's a book called Courage, The Joy of Living Dangerously, which was published in 1999, I believe, by Osho, no less. If you've seen the Netflix documentary series Wild Wild Country, you'll know that it definitely looked like he was running a cult. And Osho's version of the quote is as follows. Bravery exists only in the ocean of fear. Bravery is an island in the ocean of fear. Fear is there, but in spite of the fear, one takes the risk. That is bravery. One trembles, one is afraid to go into the dark, and still one goes. In spite of oneself, one goes. That is the meaning of being brave. It does not mean fearless, it means full of fear, but still not being dominated by it. If you remember the quote from the previous video, you'll know that that is actually very similar. Obviously, Teal's version seems to be much more condensed, but I would have hoped that if we are going to release something so similar to someone else's words, that there would at least be some consideration for the original source being linked or something like that. Obviously, Teal doesn't seem too keen on that, based on the quote that we saw at the end of the last video, which I won't ruin for you if you haven't seen that yet. So Teal's original quote, for clarity, is bravery is an island in an ocean of fear. In a ocean of fear, not an ocean of fear. Don't worry about grammar. Bravery is an island in a ocean of fear. To be brave is not to be fearless. Instead, it is to be fearful, yet remain unmoved by that fear. So, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing, right? It's shorter, but I feel like that's the same thing. So yeah, that's just a little correction I wanted to issue before we jump into today's video. In a second, we'll get into what this video is really about. But before we do, I just want to take a second to let you know about my Patreon. If you haven't heard me talk about my Patreon before, then you won't know that recently we hit a new Patreon goal, which was to hit 15 patrons. When I hit 15 patrons, I was going to start a podcast. Actually, now we've hit that goal and we've gone way over. So I'm incredibly grateful for everyone that's become a patron. But if you want to get access to that podcast, then the way you can do that is by becoming a supporter level patron, which is the $5 tier of Patreon. So if you're interested in listening to a podcast where a co-host and I talk about cults and our kind of personal experiences with different kinds of things in spirituality and all that kind of stuff, and sometimes go in directions that we wouldn't necessarily be able to go on a monetized YouTube channel without running the risk of demonetization, then go ahead and become a patron at the $5 tier, the supporter level tier. There's going to be a link in the description to that as ever, and in the premiere chat if you're here in the premiere, and obviously on the screen now just add .com before the slash there to that thingy. So while we're on Patreon and talking about the podcast and stuff, one thing I do want to be really clear about is that I'm never gonna put something behind a paywall that I feel is important and that needs to be said on the channel that I feel everyone should hear. I don't want to put like a payment barrier in place for information that I think is really important and is really going to help people. What we're talking about with the podcast is something that is going to be a bit more of a candid conversation, a bit more of a discussion on the issue of cults and other similar related issues. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, then go ahead and become a patron. Now that that is said, let's get on with this video. So there's this guy called Braco. I think I'm pronouncing that right. That's how I think it's pronounced, so that's how I'm going to pronounce it in this video. But Braco. It's written Braco, but I'm going to say Braco because I think that is how it's pronounced. And he's kind of a faith healer, but he's kind of a faith healer and he's kind of not a faith healer, right? So I've heard him called like a super healer. But you know when you think of a faith healer, what you're thinking of is someone who's just like and doing all this kind of stuff and getting everyone hyped up and like, you know, all sorts of stuff. That's not what's happening with Braco. That's not the guy we're looking at here. This guy, Braco, he doesn't speak. Not publicly and not to the press. He just stares at you. He just stares at you. He stares at a camera because he does live stream things. He just stares at the camera, or he stares at you. And that's how he heals people, apparently. Needless to say, I'm not convinced. And I do feel like what's happening because he's not talking is that there's kind of a mystique that's been built up around him about, oh, there's this guy who doesn't say anything, you know, he's so pure and blah, blah, blah. And you'll see what I mean as we go on with this. Because of him not speaking, there's a whole thing about how he doesn't make any claims about having healed anybody, which is fairly easy to say if you're not speaking. However, if you go onto his website and you click on shop, there's some links there which link to an associated site. In the store on that site, what you find is a bunch of books about him written by other people, and in those books, as far as I'm aware, claims are made. And what that reminds me of is something that Genetically Modified Skeptic talked about in a video.
The first of the tactics is one recently used by none other than Eric Hovind of Creation Today Ministries. He used a technique I call literature pairing. This is when a company that sells a certain supplement also sell, or partners with publishers who sell, literature that claims that supplement treats or cures a disease. If you're not the one selling the supplement, you can claim it does whatever you want.
That's what this reminds me of. It's like, you're avoiding saying it overtly, but you're kind of saying it. Do you know what I mean? And I think this person that you're seeing on the screen now wrote one of these biographies. I believe this person is kind of quite a passionate follower of Braco's. So whether this guy claims it overtly or not, the claims are being made by someone. Can I just say, I've got a can of Coke here, and it is the fizziest can of Coke ever. I don't know why, but it just won't stop fizzing. I don't know if it's coming up in the microphone. I'm sorry if it is. If there's a weird kind of fizzing noise, it's because my can of Coke is the fizziest can ever, and it just won't stop fizzing, like really loudly. Who hurt you? Anyway, even though he's not making these claims himself by the sounds of it, there are people that seem to be associated with him making these claims. People are claiming that like this guy's eyes, like this guy's stare, has cured them of all sorts, from like a blocked nose all the way up to like really serious conditions. I don't believe it, honestly. I don't believe it. I would want to see some real evidence of that, not just someone saying it's happened. And typically with someone like this who has these kinds of like attributes, powers, whatever, attributed to them, whether by themselves or by someone else, they do tend to have some people associated with them who will back that up, whether it's like proper like followers, like true believer kind of situation, or whether they have like doctors and scientists. And so Braco has had a few people that have kind of said, you know, science can't figure it out, and one day science will understand what's happening here. This is what he does. This is his whole thing. He does this live, and he does it on a live stream. I think what's happening here is eye contact. And I think science can figure that out. I think if you look into someone's eyes for long enough, you're going to experience some kind of emotion, right? I don't know whether that emotion can cure you of anything necessarily, other than perhaps some mental health issues that you might be having at that point, that you need that kind of thing in order to relieve. Maybe I would want to see some real evidence of that, not just someone saying it's happened. I would want to see a study. I would want to see something more than the anecdotal here. Also, because he does this in like a live stream situation, I'm wondering whether or not the brain can completely tell that when you're looking at a screen that isn't just a person sitting there. And if it can't tell, then it presumably would have the same effects as sitting in front of someone. I don't know about that, but that wouldn't surprise me. And so this reminds me of something that Darren Brown did. I think it was called Sacrifice, where he got someone who doesn't like people from other places, and I'm avoiding YouTube's censorship situation here, by just saying it like that. I'm going to say there was someone who didn't like people from other places, and they were put in front of someone from the place that this person doesn't like it when people are from. That sentence got complicated. Do you know what I mean? Someone who is the kind of person that this person doesn't like because they're from a different place. And they were like looking at each other in the eyes for ages. And the person that didn't like people who were from that place, in the end, was able to recognize the humanity of this person and actually softened up. I highly recommend checking out that thing. In fact, if you haven't seen anything Darren Brown's done, what are you playing at? Like, Darren Brown's done some really interesting stuff, and it's definitely worth a watch. I watched that on Netflix. It might be on Netflix where you are. And this also reminds me of when I met two of Teal Swans in a circle, Blake and Graciela. There was a bunch of us there. We went to this restaurant, and yeah, we stared into Graciela's eyes for anywhere between probably 10 seconds and 40 seconds to maybe a minute, maybe longer than that, depending on who it was, because we all kind of took it in turns. And yeah, it was supposed to raise our vibration or something like that. Vibration stuff aside, it definitely had an effect on some of the people that were there. I could see eye contact alone explaining this situation, right? Consider that people that have gone to Braco's events come out of these events feeling, like really a lot better, like a lot more emotionally comforted. What I would hope wouldn't happen in a situation like this is that people immediately go, oh, it's special, it's holy, we can't explain it, blah blah blah. Like, I feel like we can kind of explain it, but yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. I don't believe that people are being cured of like serious conditions with this. I would like to see more evidence, as I say, but in terms of people having like a sense of emotional relief, of feeling better emotionally after this, I get that. I could see that happening. But then put anyone up there, and you'll notice with this Braco guy, the way he looks at you is like Puss in Boots from Shrek. Like, that is going to have an effect on someone. And I think you could put anyone up there with the Puss in Boots eyes, and you might get that might get a similar response. However, here's something else to consider. What it seems like is happening at his events is, first of all, people know what they're there for. I don't think many people that go along to his events are going along not knowing what they're there for. Maybe they've been dragged along by a family member or whatever, but typically with an event like this, yeah, that kind of thing's going to happen. I could imagine to some extent some people are going to go, oh, what's this thing? Let's go along. It doesn't cost very much. Let's go and see what's going on, you know. And to his credit, he doesn't charge very much for it. I would imagine for the majority of people, they know what they're getting into. They've read the books, they've watched his live streams, and they want to get it in person, you know. And I do want to be clear here that at no point am I saying that Braco is a scam artist or is a cult leader or anything like that, actually. Although I do think that looking at this is relevant for a conversation about cults, because what you can see here is so many factors that actually seem to prime people to have a certain response. This kind of thing, if this was being done and then people were being exploited off the back of it, and people were being kind of told that they need to do this, they need to live this way, they need to live that way, and maybe that's happening with Braco, I don't know, I'm not aware of it if it is, then this kind of thing could set the stage for increased control, increased influence. So I think it's definitely relevant to a conversation on cults for that reason alone. And what you do see is, to some extent, some of Lifton's 8 criteria being met here as well. So at his events, it looks to me like people are going there kind of knowing what they're in for, right? Then if the music that you hear in the videos of him is playing at the live events, and I imagine it is because, you know, brand consistency and all that, then that again is going to elicit some kind of an emotional response, because it's very kind of tender, like very gentle music. I mean, how many times have we documented the effects of music on a person? Like, it would make sense that if someone wants to elicit a response from someone, that they would use music. And again, I'm not saying that's what Braco's doing here. I don't know. At least some people that go to these events, they're going to be fully aware of who Braco is and what he's doing, right? So people go to the event. Some people know what they're there for. There's music on. Maybe there's music, maybe there's not. If there is music on, again, that's kind of getting people into a certain emotional state. Then Braco comes out, stares at you for a bit, and everyone's like, And the people that don't know what they're there for at this point, it's going to be hard not to conform. Unless you're sitting there as like a declared skeptic and you're there for that purpose, the purpose of skepticism and critical analysis, it might be kind of difficult to not just kind of go along with it. So after Braco's done his staring, I think what happens is he fucks off the stage, and then a microphone's passed round. And it's kind of encouraged then, I think, that people talk about their experience of what's happened with Braco's staring, right? So just imagine this, right? You've come to this event. Let's say you don't know anything about Braco and a friend of yours has brought you along, right? You're into this kind of stuff. You're into kind of wooey new agey stuff, maybe, or you're like a light Christian. You believe in God. You believe in the power of healing and spirit or whatever, and you're interested in this kind of thing. And let's say that's the kind of person you are. So you go along. You walk in. There's all these people there. Oh, hi, hello. That do know what they're into, and they're already into all this kind of stuff. They're already on that wavelength, right? Then the music's on as well. So you've got kind of like maybe like gentle flute music that's priming you emotionally. Then Braco bowls in, stares everybody down, with his Puss in Boots eyes. Everyone kind of chills out. Then a microphone starts getting handed round, and someone stands up. I just had the most wonderful experience, and I just felt so alive and so just tender and raw, and I just felt how pure he is, and it just opened me up, and I've just never felt this way. I haven't felt this way for years, that kind of thing. And then the microphone's passed to the next person. I don't know that it's passed around everyone. I don't imagine it is. It's just probably just volunteers. But let's say someone passes the microphone to you, and you've gone along with it. It's now going to be hard for you to not stand up and add to that and give your kind of confession. If we're calling it a confession situation, maybe that's not the right word, but to give your testimonial, right? And you can imagine the testimonials escalating as well, as one person says, it really touched me, and the moment someone gets a tear on, everyone gets emotional, and so do you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to make claims at that point of this guy being miraculous. Add to this the possibility, and I don't know if this is happening with Braco, but there are people that do things like this that will plant people in the audience. And so you've got, just imagine this is happening, but the very first person you hear from is someone planted there, set there to encourage people to think in a certain way. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. Then it goes on to the next person yes ands, and they add to that, and then maybe somewhere along the line someone else is planted to escalate the testimonials. You can really see how someone will go along with this. You can really see how someone could get caught up in this and think that this guy is doing something. Add to that as well, like there was on his YouTube channel, there was a video of him doing something in the UK, I think. What it looked like is that the event in the video was held in a church. So you've already got all of this stuff, and then add to that he's doing this in a church. I mean, what is a church to most people? It's a place of quiet reflection. It's a place to connect with God. It's a place where holy things and sacred things happen, right? So you put an event like this in a church, and immediately you're kind of piggybacking off of that. So again, whether consciously or not, whether deliberately or not, I feel like that effect is going to unfold. So if we really want to test whether or not Braco is actually capable of what it seems is being said he is capable of, then we're going to have some real investigation into this in a less controlled environment, or I could say in a more controlled environment, but controlled by people who are ready to do a test rather than controlled by people who are presumably working for Braco. As I say though, and I want to be fair, because I want to be as fair as possible in the videos that I'm making. The entry fee is not huge. It's like 10 euros, which is like £8, $11, something like that per person. I could imagine someone paying something like that to perhaps get into an art exhibition or something. So, I mean, that's not, at least he's not charging like 1,000 euros or whatever to get into these things, because it does seem like he's working mostly out of Europe. So there's one article that has informed a fair bit of stuff that I'm talking about here, which is from, I think, the Skeptical Inquirer. I think that's what it's called. There's a link to everything that I'm using for this video in the description below. But one thing in that article that I thought was quite interesting is that apparently his DVDs come with a warning. But I'm going to read off what I found is apparently the warning from the DVDs. It apparently says Braco has been given firm guidelines from Spirit that no gazing in any DVDs or online can be longer than 7 seconds. So I don't know if that's him, he's not allowed to gaze for longer than 7 seconds, or the audience is allowed, should not gaze for longer than 7 seconds. I mean, he has gazed for longer than 7 seconds in a video, I think, so maybe that does mean the audience. What interests me here, that he has been given firm guidelines from Spirit. So that to me sounds like a claim of having a connection with a higher power here. So does that just throw all this "he doesn't make claims" stuff in the bin? I don't know. So I believe there's another warning that's given. I don't know if this is for the DVDs or for the live events. It seems like it's for like his like in-person live events that are held like in wherever, like venues, churches, whatever. The warning, I believe, says the energy could overburden children. So the sessions are not open for visitors under the age of 18 or to pregnant women after their 3rd month. For your children and for other people who are not able to attend a session, it is recommended that you bring a photo of that person to a session instead. The power of Braco's gaze can equally reach people through photos, and the same level of healing and transformation occur through his method. Like, I don't know, Rick. I don't know. I just don't believe this. I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all. I mean, it's weird that there's all these warnings made. I mean, if there is a risk of someone who's pregnant and in their 3rd month of pregnancy for staring into someone's eyes, then I would hope that that's something that doctors are advising against. And again, should we be blindfolding all children under the age of 18? Or is it just, oh wait, no, it's probably just Braco, which again is creating a kind of higher position for this character by the looks of it. So, I mean, that is strange. And I know that the more you dig on something like this, the more you turn up strange and wonderful things. So if you're interested in looking into Braco, and you do, and you find something that you think, whoa, this is weirder, this makes it even weirder than it already was, let me know. Send me a message on like Discord or Twitter or whatever. I'm always interested to hear. And if it is particularly strange, then I'll talk about it in a future video. So I feel like the thing with Braco is that, you know, whether or not he's a cult leader, whether or not he's a scam artist, whether or not he's doing this in earnest, situations like this are kind of the building blocks of undue influence. In things like milieu control, sacred science, planned spontaneity, mystical manipulation, I think we've seen examples to some extent, and maybe to like a lesser extent, of all of those things. So whether or not what's being done here is a cult, whether or not it is a scam, whatever it is, and I don't know what it is necessarily, as I say, I think it's important to be aware of these things, to notice these things, and to, I think, be practiced at picking these things out, because it's like that you start to protect yourself against people taking advantage of you. You protect yourself against falling into believing something that maybe isn't really what it seems, you know. These are definitely things to be aware of, definitely things to be looking out for, and I think a skeptical mind, critical thinking, they go a long way. Definitely go a long way. So I want to just say a massive thank you to Mimi for putting me onto Braco. I don't know if thank you is the right thing to say, but yeah, thanks for making me aware of this strange staring Puss in Boots guy. and yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button. If you want to see more from me, then hit subscribe and hit the bell thing so that you'll be notified at least sometimes when I make a new video. And if you want to support the channel, as I mentioned earlier, the best way to do that really is through Patreon. If you become a patron at the $5 level, you're going to get access to the podcast that I mentioned earlier. That's just $5 a month. The supporter tier, it's called, on Patreon. And yeah, you'll get access to the monthly podcast. First episode of the podcast has already been recorded, and it's on the way as I'm recording this to being uploaded and being available to patrons, supporter tier and up. And there's also a bunch of other stuff there that you're going to get access to as well. What's really important for me is that you as patrons know how grateful I am for your support. So I want to do everything I can to show that gratitude. That said, yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.